There's an obvious difference between me telling you that I made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch today versus me telling you that I am a chef. Isn't there? In one case, I'm just letting you know what I did, something that most of us can do. But in the second example, I am sharing an identity with you, and that identity has a whole lot more weight to it, doesn't it? It's not just what I did, it's who I am. It's how I dress, it's how I speak, it's the school I went to, the shows that I watch, the thing that I obsess over, the demographic, the community that I'm a part of. Well, exactly the same thing can be said for I did a drawing today versus I'm an artist. In one case, I was doing something that, well, pretty much everybody on the planet's done very early on in life and may or may not have continued to do growing up. We do drawings. Here's a drawing of my mother. Here's a drawing of my cat. But when you identify as an artist, you are now communicating something a lot more personal, a lot more profound, a lot more involved. It is who you hang around with. It is the artists that you follow. It's the websites that you visit. It's the tutorials that you watch. It's the YouTube videos that you listen to. It's the people that you fan over and where you collect your resources. Hey, it might even trickle into the way you dress and the way you talk and the way you wear your makeup and the way you do your hair. It's an identity. It's an all-encompassing identity. Not only that, but that identity of yours might be nuanced. Are you a graphic designer who works in some cool, fancy downtown studio? Are you a gallery fine artist who smells of oil paint and linseed oil and has a beautiful, dusty loft with windows up to the ceiling? Are you a comic book artist or a digital painter, somebody who has a really cool computer set up and has all your drawings up on the wall? Notice when I just expressed that, I used an interesting term. I said, are you the type of artist who does something? These are words associated with identity. And when I share that identity with you, you can probably picture the kind of conventions I go to. You might get an idea of the kind of friends that I hang around with, etc. There's a lot wrapped up in that identity. However, particularly for younger artists, I find, artists who haven't been around as long, might not have as much experience personally or professionally in art, we tend to have this feeling like we have to be at a certain skill level to qualify, or at least to be allowed the privilege to call ourselves, quote, artists. That you have to have paid your dues to a certain degree in order to be allowed to claim that title as an artist. And I'm going to start today's video off by letting you know right off the bat, if that's the way you feel, you're wrong. If you're somebody who loves to draw, if you're somebody who wants to get good, whether you're good or not, if you have the heart and the passion and the drive to pursue art, and if drawing is something that you love doing every single day, then you are an artist. Because an artist is an artist before they get that job. An artist needs to learn that they're an artist the minute they decide that it's something that they love and it's something that they want to pursue. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, when I was in my mid-20s, I discovered swing dancing walking into a swing dance club. Probably a story, if you've been following my channel, you've probably heard me talk about this story before, right? I walked into the swing dance club and I saw the whole atmosphere and the music and people moving. And despite the fact that I had never danced a day of swing in my life, I had no idea what the basic moves were, what the basic steps were. Something in my soul told me, Adam, you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. It just emotionally clicked for me. And because that belief in me was so strong, and the emotional reaction that I had to walking into that place was so strong, fast forward 25 years later, and I still identify as a dancer, even when sometimes I don't get to dance for 6 months or 8 months because I'm busy, because I'm working, because I'm drawing all the time. I've never given up that title of dancer, ever. And whenever I walk back into a salsa club, because in the last decade and a half or so, kind of moved from swing over to salsa, I feel home. I don't feel like some outcast who doesn't belong there anymore. I always feel like I belong in a Latin club, even if nobody else does. I don't care. because this is an identity that I chose for myself. Well, as an artist, one of the most important things that we can do and that we should do if we really do want to grow and use that wonderful law of attraction to start feeding our life with inspiration and resources and a community and friends and all of those things is, first and foremost, don't wait for permission to call yourself an artist. Effectively today, I, Adam Duff of Solemn Mind and Body, bestow upon you the official title of artist. Now off with you. Go create masterpieces. Okay? So now that that's out of the way, what I want to share with you today is nuance to the word commitment. And if you haven't watched any of my earlier art talks, because this is something I did talk about in the past, a little bit of clarification on what the word commitment should mean to you realistically. In an earlier art talk that I probably recorded years ago, I offered a little bit of clarity and perspective on what the word commitment means. And I believe it was inspired by a TED talk that I had listened to shortly before, where the speaker was making a distinction between the word commitment and the word permanent. And that one of the things that very often turn people off of the idea of making serious commitments to things is the fear of the permanency that commitment implies. Do you promise to love this person, this emu, this frog, this tortoise, for the rest of your life till death do you part? Well, in front of all of your friends, in a public gathering, you might say, yes, absolutely. Because not many people say, well, I don't know, we'll see where it goes in the next 10 years. I'm not sure. Usually it's a yes or no answer. But realistically, you're not psychic. Realistically, hey, things could go sour. Hopefully not, of course. But you can't know for sure. So some people just say yes and they do their best and they do commit. Sometimes too much, sometimes not enough. In other cases, people just don't commit. People are just afraid to make that commitment because they're afraid that they might make a mistake. And as artists, we do this too, as professionals, as people who want to get good at stuff. We very often hide behind the protective blanket of, well, I just want to see what's out there, right? And the younger you are, more often than not, the younger you are when you really have far less perspective on where your life is going because you've only been on the planet for 20, 25 years. This is often where you see teenagers, people in their 20s, maybe early 30s that bounce from relationship to relationship because they're afraid to overcommit to one person in fears that they're making the wrong choice, most likely because, well, where the hell is their life going to be in the next 10 years? They have no idea. If you can't commit to yourself, how can you commit to somebody else? But the problem is, if you keep doing that for decades, you're eventually going to find yourself alone because you can't commit. Because no matter how old you get, no matter how long you wait, you're never, ever, ever going to know for sure. So one of the reasons why older people tend to commit to long-term relationships more successfully and more willingly is because they've been around the block a few times. They've sampled many different aspects of life, many different aspects of different people, and they're getting a stronger idea on what it is that they want, and the word commitment becomes a little bit less fearful. So you can see how age, demographic, lifestyle, and personality are all things that can add nuance to the word commitment. But in my opinion, if you really do want to grow, if you really do want to feel a sense of belonging, you don't want to feel alienated. You don't want to feel locked out by some elitist group that hold the key to your future. Then my advice to you is commit fully to what it is that you want to do. However, you still need to have an honest perspective because you're not psychic. So if and when you do commit, don't put the word permanency to it. Don't say, I commit forever, because that isn't only unrealistic, but it's also something that might scare you. Instead, you say, I fully commit for now. But you need to commit. You need to say, this is what I do. This is what I want to identify as. These are the people that I want to hang out with. And when I harken back to that dance analogy, there were reasons why, despite the fact that I love to dance, despite the fact that I love going out and I feel so good when I come home at the end of the day, sweaty, and I take a shower and I feel all cozy and worked out and awesome and fresh, that I didn't commit my life to being a dancer or to be a dance teacher. Although, there's a good chance I could if I wanted to. It's because there's more to commitment than just doing something. There's a whole ecosystem around it. And in that ecosystem, I would not have been privy to, I would not have felt with my body had I not made that commitment. And this, what I'm going to share with you, isn't only inspired by my own experiences, but it's yet another thing that was touched on in the book Finding Your Element by Sir Ken Robinson, somebody whose video a couple of weeks ago I paid tribute to, the late Sir Ken Robinson, rest in peace. In that book, he talks about finding your element. In that book, he talks about what goes into finding your element. And one of the things that matters, and something he mentioned in his own experiences, was that despite the fact that there were certain things in his life that he really loved, he didn't necessarily click with the people. Not that they were bad, it's just that they weren't his wavelength. He didn't feel, I think it was something to do with theater, if I'm not mistaken, because he studied theater. And he said even though he loved acting, there was something about the acting crowd that he didn't quite click with. And if you can't click with the community, maybe that career isn't for you for that reason, unless there's some way of getting around it, like working independently, which, as an actor, not very likely. It's kind of a group effort. The same thing applies to art. I wouldn't be an artist professionally today if I didn't really like artists. If I didn't get along with concept artists and illustrators, if I couldn't talk the talk with you, if we didn't relate to each other. Notice that one of the most common comments I get in my videos, or the videos of a lot of the artists that you love watching, is, man, you really say the right things at the right time. I was thinking it and you said it. You know why? Because I consider you and me kindred spirits. The very fact that you tell me that you can relate to what I'm saying means you're my people. I'm your people. We get each other. That's very validating. And it's funny because I hear this from young artists who say in the same comment in my videos, I don't know if I can call myself an artist yet. And if you're listening to me right now, you realize how ironic it is that you're saying, I identify as an artist emotionally. I just don't identify as an artist professionally. In my opinion, the one and the same. If you identify as an artist emotionally, it's just a matter of time. Even though I couldn't dance, I identified as a dancer until I learned. And I learned quickly because I identified as it. However, depending on where you are in life, there are nuances to this. There are differences in how you may want to consider it. And I want to offer you a couple of options, a couple of bits of perspective on that word commitment in your art career, so that you can continue to grow, you can continue to expand, and you don't get lost down the rabbit hole of possibilities too much that can sometimes cost a lot of time and energy, and in some cases be so crippling that it holds back careers. I know from my own experiences, and I know from the experience of working with many artists. So I want to break this down into 3 different phases in your artistic career: the beginning, the middle, and the end. At the beginning of your career, you are afraid to commit because you have your entire life ahead of you. You don't know if drawing is something you want to do for a living. Maybe you don't have the support from your family or your friends and people are telling you you're wasting your time. You don't know if you want to dedicate half a decade to a decade of your life studying it and investing your money and energy into it. You just don't have all the answers just yet. So in your case, if you're unsure, I want you to commit to the word artist. Not commit to a career path in particular. Not commit to a style because you haven't been drawing that long. Maybe you've only been doing this for a couple of months or a couple of years. You need to see what's out there. That's like you saying, I'm going to marry the first person who I see when I'm 13 years old and I just had my first kiss. I mean, you can say I'm going to marry you, but good luck. There is a fairly good chance it might not work out. It does happen, but not very frequently. So commit yourself to the word artist, but don't commit yourself to a career type. Don't commit yourself to a style. At that phase in your career, you want to draw, you want to grow, but you also want to experiment. You want to, quote, date around and meet different people, see what your taste is, try out different styles. Maybe you feel a little bit more fine artist, you feel a little bit more unique, you feel like your style of communication doesn't really fit into a box, so to speak. So you want to do your thing and express yourself in a unique way because you consider yourself a bit of an anomaly. You're a bit of an oddball of a human being, and you don't necessarily communicate in a more mainstream way that's commercially viable. Maybe you are somebody who's very in touch with style, with aesthetics, with trends. Maybe you're somebody who does communicate very clearly in a graphic way that people can really, really relate to. That might fall more into an illustrator's perspective. Maybe you find when you get a little bit too caught up in aesthetics and style, you really lose your footing and your grounding and you really don't know where you're going. You feel a little bit kind of all over the place. And I really can't relate to all these hippies that talk about personal expression. And you really love to indulge in the technicality of image creating. Well, maybe you'll start to move a little bit more in the direction of a designer, somebody who's more technically focused. There are many, many different nuances to art, and art is an extension of your personality. So the more you experiment, the more you start to find not only the art style, but the art community who communicate in a way that really resonates with you on a personal level. Just because you're a dancer doesn't mean you're going to enjoy Irish dancing and hip hop and salsa and swing and bachata. And heck, if you like salsa, are you more of a Cuban salsa dancer? Are you more of a North American style salsa dancer? Are you more ballroom? Are you more street style? I mean, there's many different nuances to that as well. Like, for instance, I identify as a dark fantasy illustrator. But there are many, many different types of dark fantasy illustrators. Some who do very dark, gritty, modern, street style, like Frank Miller type of stuff. And somebody like me who does very dark souls, humanoid creature designs. Or somebody like Bobby Rebholz, who's he leans a little bit more towards the alien and the animalistic side of creature, the kind of stuff you'd see in Monster Hunter, for example. There's many, many different nuances to it. Some people I identify with and can communicate with and learn from far more effectively, like Anthony Jones, for instance, somebody who I talk about all the time, and some less. Just because we identify in an ecosystem of creature doesn't mean we all draw exactly the same thing. But then there's little bits of crossover, right? Somebody who does dance street style salsa or somebody who dances ballroom salsa might understand and get swing because they both have a jazz foundation. So there might be a crossover of desires and maybe even a crossover of styles. Like for me, for instance, because I came from a swing background and I was very used to the dynamic and the physical contact style of swing, there was an adaptation later on that translated into doing salsa. But anybody who came from a traditional salsa background and never danced swing, and somebody who did dance swing could look at the way me and my partner dance and say, there's something unique about the way he does that. A swing dancer would be able to point out that provenance, that history, that influence of swing in my salsa style. They could just see it. Same thing applies to your art. So when you're younger, you do want to identify as an artist, but you also want to be very experimental. What I recommend you do is draw all the time. And if you feel like certain drawing styles, certain techniques, certain teaching styles that you hear from different mentors, different schools, different tutorials online, some really ignite a fire in you and really click in your brain and make you go, yeah, I really like that. Listen to your gut, because that feeling is telling you to pay attention, that there's something emotionally clicking with you, something narratively, something technically clicking with you that you don't want to ignore. And it's something that I took for granted at the early phases of my career, where I got overly seduced by all these millions of different amazing styles of art out there. And I didn't yet make a distinction between the things that I loved looking at and the things that I emotionally connected with. There's a very big difference between the two. If you look at certain artists or emulate certain artist style or learn from certain types of artists and you just feel like you can pump out 7 drawings in a row and you just feel like you're in your flow, you found the right inspiration. You found the right reference. However, if you look at an artist who you think is absolutely the cat's meow, if you look at an artist who's just absolutely incredible, but when you sit down and try to draw their style, not only does it feel like it feels like you walked into a foreign country and you don't know a word of what anybody else is saying and you feel completely out of your element, but even worse, you feel like it knocks off your flow so bad that it might take you days or weeks or even months sometimes to get your flow back. You just feel like you kind of lost that connection to your art. That to me is a red flag that you were seduced by the beauty but ignored your emotional connection to that type of art. And I can remember numerous times along my career path where I felt like I was trying to imitate or trying to learn from a certain style of art, but I took for granted just how completely foreign that language was for me as an individual, as an artist. And it took me a long time to come full circle and find myself again. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. Now you're more in the middle portion of your artistic professional career. Maybe you've worked a little. Maybe you're starting to get a little bit of a sense of style in your artwork. I would say that would be the period in your life artistically that you should commit the most fully to what you're already doing. Meaning, if you have clicked into something, if a piece fell into place and something clicks, my advice to you is don't change. Keep doing what you're doing. And the reason being is, now that you've found that emotional connection to what you're doing, now that you feel like you've tested, you've, quote, dated a lot of different art styles, and you have a very good feeling of what you've done, now you've got to really lean into the word commitment heavily. The same way, if you've dated a bunch of people and then you just find your soulmate, they're everything, they're just super fine, and you decide to get into a serious relationship, commit to that relationship. Don't start flirting with other art styles. Yes, I'm using dating analogies to talk about art. But remember, this is an emotional thing. This is a part of our life, just like a real relationship with a partner. You want to commit to that partner, because if you don't, it's going to start to fade. If you take that discovery, if you take that love for granted and you don't fight for it and you don't work your way through the good and bad, you get yourself past the honeymoon phase and you find yourself in a place of stability, then you're never going to go anywhere with it. So to me, when you find that, that's when you really need to nurture it. If you find out, if you discover that doing very Studio Ghibli style anime with a bit of a Dark Soulsian twist to it, you know, you've really got that kind of foundation, you've got a style and a graphic style that really, really, really clicks with you, and you really want to go with it, go in. Go all in. Go to the schools, study from the artists, practice and do some fan art of the ones that you really, really love, and pursue the careers that really help to nurture that artistic style. You have now made a commitment to yourself. And keep going. And keep going and keep going so long as it continues to feed your artistic soul. As long as you continue to find growth. And consider that moving forward throughout your career as your artistic foundation. That is your home base. That is your safe place. Every artist, once you become a professional, in my opinion, need to have a safe place. If you start to become more serious with your art career and you just decide to go full 180 and do something completely different for no justifiable reason, then what you're essentially doing is you're taking around a decade or a decade and a half of experience and you're throwing it in the garbage and you're starting over from scratch. And that can have a very detrimental impact on your career. Now, by the time you've reached this point, you aren't really in the dating phase so much anymore. You're more in the, I'm trying to build a life with my art. I'm trying to maybe one day aim towards having a family with my art. I'm going to stick to these dating analogies because I think it's working for me today. Let me know in the comments below if, if I'm getting on your nerves. Okay? What you're doing is you're setting a foundation. Now, what happens once that foundation is set? Once you have this rhythm, once you have this stability in your art, in your career, well, you can keep going in that direction, but there's a very good chance at a certain point, if all you keep doing is the same thing you do all the time, it's going to start to get stale at a certain point. Yes, you've created a foundation, but is it still bringing value into your life apart from stability? And when that happens, if I go back to the relationship analogy, if you wake up every morning, you put on your clothes, you make your coffee, you go to work, you come home from work, you put on your comfy clothes, you make your dinner, you go to bed, you watch a movie. You wake up the next day, you have your coffee, etc., etc. Like if you ever watched the movie Nobody, when he goes through the routine of life every single day. If that's what you're doing, the spark starts to die, doesn't it? So what do you need to do to ignite the spark? What do you need to do psychologically to promote growth, excitement, and productivity? Where I am in this phase of my career, it's about knowing your foundation and respecting your foundation, but focusing your energy towards expansion, growth, evolution. You're evolving into something bigger. And this isn't only how I look at my career and how I grow, this is also how I look at how I produce every piece of art. Whenever I sit down to draw, I respect that commitment that I've made. I respect that foundation that I've built over many years. Dark fantasy illustration, creature design. However, at this phase in my career, at this phase in my artistic journey, I have shifted my focus from discovery to instead evolution, growth, and expansion. So I actively seek artists, lessons, schools, tutorials, inspirations, videos, lectures, podcasts that help to inform me and enrich my knowledge of what it is that I do. I have the safety net of knowing what my foundation is, so I'm not hitting that dreaded reset button every single time I sit down to draw. However, through growing, through practicing every day, through staying heavily involved in what I'm doing and actively seeking knowledge that can help to make me better at what I do, make me more efficient at what I do, make me more expressive at what I do, make me more polished at what I do, that I have the excitement to keep showing up to that drawing board, that quote, relationship with my art is exciting. By making that commitment to yourself and by making your commitment to growing and building on your foundation artistically, that's where you start to become more and more identifiable as an artist. You made a commitment to your people, to your gang, to your art clan, to your tribe artistically. So you feel that sense of belonging, and you've been feeling that sense of belonging for a long time. As the years pass, the days, months, years, and then eventually decades that you've been committed to this art community, the more of a fixture in this community you become. That you have history with this community. You've had some good experiences and some bad experiences. You've worked out through the hard times, and you've been there for the best of times. And that relationship that you create with your art and with your artistic community is what really makes you feel that sense of belonging. It makes you discoverable. It's like being a musician who is extremely well known for a style of music like Harry Connick Jr. and jazz, right? He's known for that because he grew up in New Orleans, and he's got that blues background, and he's a pianist first and a singer second, and he's got the voice and the friends and the history. He's had good days, he's had bad days, he's had albums that didn't quite land and others that were absolute mega hits and everything in between. But you don't care, because his name is written in stone. His legacy is written in stone. And from that point forward, it's all about him focusing on becoming a better and more refined version of that, becoming a more polished version of that. And in my humble opinion, once you've made that discovery, and once you've found yourself in that point in your life, looking at where my life is right now and where my life is going to be moving forward for the next 150 years artistically, that second phase of your career is the phase that's going to last until the third phase. And that third phase is death. That's it. Because to me, when I look at all of my favorite artists, the ones who've made the most lasting, meaningful impacts in their respective artistic communities. I'm thinking of Gisła Beksiński. I'm thinking of Frank Frazetta. I'm thinking of Chuck Jones. I'm thinking about all of these artists who have been around and who've also passed away. They have lived an artistic career through to the very, very end. Some prematurely, like Beksiński, unfortunately. He was taken from us before his time. Chuck Jones lived until his 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Chuck Jones, the director of Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and all that fun stuff. Frank Frazetta, who lived a very long, successful career, but he drew until his heart stopped. And that's kind of exactly what I intend on doing. And to me, that's the most exciting thing about being an artist in the first place. I think one of the things that's the most rewarding about this commitment that I've made to this partner in love and life that I've made with my art is that I know with a great amount of confidence, although I could be wrong, we'll see, but I feel extremely confident about the fact that this love is forever, and that I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be complete. But I'm going to die the most complete version of who I am, because I'm going to continue to find a reason to grow. I'm going to continue to find a reason to nurture this artistic voice of mine, these artistic pursuits of mine, these artistic evolutions, and God only knows where I'm going to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I'm so excited to find out. I have no idea, but I'm not afraid anymore. The word commitment does not scare me anymore. I know that I've been in this for 30 years, professionally at least. I've been in this 45 years through my passion. And I know now that the love that I have for what I do is stronger now and more constant and more confident than it's been in my entire life. I think back at the days when I was in my teens and 20s, finding any and every excuse I could to draw, to being somebody now who literally can't wait to come back from the gym and take a shower so he can put on some comfy clothes and sit down at 7 o'clock a.m. and start drawing. And going to bed at night thinking about what I'm going to do next in my drawing. It's always on my mind. And what's really wonderful about being an artist is when we finally do reach that epic third phase, of our artistic careers, of our commitments, initiated by the Grim Reaper themselves, that from that point moving forward, the growth and the meaning behind my artwork will no longer be in my hands. It'll be in yours forever. Because, to piggyback off of what Peter Jackson said in the making of Lord of the Rings, pain is temporary, film is forever. To you I say, pain is temporary, art is forever. Remember, you're not just drawing something. You've made a commitment to being something and sharing something that will continue to exist for all time. That whatever it is that you commit yourself to artistically, you are not just capturing, you're immortalizing. And with that said, I love you all with all my heart. Enjoy the rest of the song, and happy painting.